The vote was 7-1. I know because my husband's sister typed up the results in an email she sent to the entire family group thread, every aunt, every cousin, every in-law, and she attached a PDF she had titled, and I want you to notice this word choice, Family Gathering Protocol, Updated Parameters. It was dated a Tuesday, 11:18 in the morning. I was at my desk when it landed, 3 floors up in a building where I spend my days auditing financial irregularities for a living, and the subject line read, Going forward, family events. I am a forensic accountant. I have spent 14 years finding the number that doesn't belong, the timestamp that's off by 6 minutes, the deposit that doesn't match the invoice. I find what people try to hide inside things that look ordinary. The email was not hiding anything. It said in plain 12-point Arial that the family had reached a consensus that my presence at gatherings had become a source of tension, and that going forward events would be coordinated in a way that allowed everyone to feel comfortable. My name appeared once in a sub-bullet point, in a list titled Attendance Considerations. I was the only item on that list. Welcome back to Family Revenge Stories New, the channel where quiet people keep the receipts, and family learns that boundaries carry a price tag they didn't read before signing. If you've ever had someone try to remove you from your own life with a PDF, you're exactly where you need to be. Drop a comment. Subscribe. Let's get into it. I need to back up because the email did not come from nowhere, and nothing that happened afterward makes sense without understanding the arithmetic this family ran on me for 9 years. My name is Miriam. I am 38 years old. I hold a CPA license and a CFE designation, Certified Fraud Examiner, which means I am, professionally speaking, a person who documents everything and trusts very little. My husband, Daniel, used to joke that I was the only woman he'd ever dated who kept receipts for restaurant meals. He said it like it was charming. He was not wrong. I met Daniel's family the summer before our wedding. His mother, Constance, was a woman who had spent 40 years being the center of gravity in a room. She had that particular talent some matriarchs develop, the ability to make everyone feel slightly off balance in her presence, like the floor was imperceptibly tilted in her direction. She was not cruel exactly. She was the kind of person who gives gifts with conditions so subtle you don't notice them until the condition comes due. Daniel's father, Raymond, had passed 3 years before I came into the picture. What he left behind was a family that had quietly reorganized itself around Constance's preferences. His sister, Joanna, was 34 and lived 20 minutes from their mother. His brother, Marcus, lived in the same suburb, drove his mother to her medical appointments, and had never, in 9 years of my observation, disagreed with her about anything in front of witnesses. I was not from that kind of family. I came from people who said exactly what they meant and expected you to do the same. I did not understand for a long time that this was my first strike. My second strike was that I paid attention. Not to anything dramatic. I paid attention the way I always do, to the small numbers. The way the family's grocery costs always seemed to land on Daniel's card when we visited. The way our contribution to the beach house rental was always slightly higher than the others, because Constance had mentioned, once quietly, that Daniel had always had the most financial flexibility. The way the Christmas gathering rotated to everyone else's house except ours, but we were expected to arrive early and help set up regardless of whose address was on the invitation. I noticed. I said nothing. I filed it. For 9 years, I was the daughter-in-law who showed up. I made the casseroles. I drove the 90 minutes each way for the quarterly dinners. I sat at the table and listened to Joanna and Marcus plan a family vacation to Portugal that they announced as a family trip, but had already booked without asking us. I smiled. I held Daniel's hand under the table. I drove home. I am not telling you this because I want you to feel sorry for me. I am telling you because you need to understand the ledger before I show you what was on the other side of it. The specific act that produced the email happened 6 weeks before it arrived. Constance turned 70. The family organized a dinner, 63 people, a private room at a restaurant in the city, a slideshow that Joanna managed, and a speech that Marcus had been workshopping for 2 months. I know it was 2 months because I had heard 4 versions of it. I had organized the flowers. I had coordinated with the restaurant on the dietary restrictions. I had driven out 3 Saturdays before to help Joanna compile the photos for the slideshow, and I had digitized 14 of them from old prints because no one else owned a scanner. The dinner was a Saturday in March. It went well by the family's measure. Constance cried when they played a video her grandchildren made. The food was good. The speech Marcus gave was the version he'd landed on, and it was fine. What happened after the speech was the inciting incident. Constance stood up to say thank you to the family. She named every person at the table, every child, every spouse, every grandchild. She said something specific about each of them. She said Marcus had been her rock. She said Joanna was her heart. She named Daniel and said he had always been her quiet strength. Then she moved on. She did not say my name. 63 people at a table. I watched Daniel's face. He heard it too, that split second where he noticed and then chose in real time to look down at his plate. He didn't reach for my hand. He reached for his water glass. I did not cry. I picked up my fork and I finished my salmon. But I opened the notes app on my phone under the table and I typed, March 8th. 70th dinner. 63 people. My name not said. And then because I am who I am, I noted the time, 8:47 p.m. That note is still there. I have looked at it since. It looks different now than it did that night. The weeks after the dinner were quiet. And then on a Tuesday at 11:18 a.m. the email arrived. I read it twice at my desk. Then I forwarded it to my personal folder, the one I keep encrypted on a local drive. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Patricia. She has known me for 6 years. When I told her what the email said, she was quiet for 4 seconds, which is a long time for Patricia. Then she said, Miriam, did Raymond ever get around to updating that will? I said I didn't know. She said, find out. Raymond had died 7 years before. His estate had been handled by a firm downtown, and what the family had told us, what everyone had assumed, was that everything had gone to Constance outright, the house, the investment accounts, all of it. The family spoke about it that way. Constance spoke about it that way. The money was hers. I knew the name of the firm because it appeared on a piece of correspondence that had come to our house, by mistake, 4 years earlier. A letter that had been meant for Daniel, forwarded from his childhood address. He'd opened it, read it, and said it was something boring about his father's estate and nothing to worry about. He'd thrown it away. I had retrieved it from the recycling before the truck came that Friday. I have it in a file labeled with the date. I called the firm on a Wednesday morning. I gave them my name, my relationship, my bar number as a CPA. And I asked whether there were any instruments associated with Raymond Whitmore's estate that remained in active administration. I expected to be told no. I expected the question to bounce. Instead, I was transferred to a partner named Gerald who said, and I wrote this down in the moment, I've been waiting for someone to ask about that actually. Your husband is listed on a secondary instrument we've been holding. Can you both come in? We went in that Friday. Both of us. Daniel in his coat, me with my folder. Gerald set 3 documents on the table. The first was Raymond's original will. Everything to Constance as stated. Nothing remarkable. The second was an amendment, filed 11 months before Raymond's death. It had never been discussed at the family table, never mentioned by Constance, never referenced in any of the estate conversations the family had conducted over 7 years. The amendment created a testamentary trust for Daniel specifically, a separate account funded by a portfolio Raymond had held in his own name, that was to be held in trust until either Constance's death or Daniel's 35th birthday, whichever came first. Daniel turned 35 8 months ago. The trust had been sitting administered and untouched for 8 months because no one had claimed it. The value of the trust, as of that Friday, $412,000. I did not react. I continued reading. The third document was a letter. It was from Raymond. It was addressed to Daniel by name and had been sealed with the estate paperwork, to be released alongside the trust documentation. Gerald slid it across the table and said he'd give us a moment. The letter was 1 page. Raymond's handwriting. I'd seen it on 1 birthday card, 1 Christmas card. The same hand. I will not read you the whole letter. Some things are not mine to share. But the paragraph at the bottom is the one that matters. And Daniel read it and went very still beside me. Raymond wrote, "I know your mother. I know how families run when there is money in the room. I hope by the time you read this it is not a problem. But if it is, if you find yourself being pushed in a direction that doesn't feel like yours, use this to stand on your own ground. It is yours. It was always yours. Don't let anyone make you small for having it." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in my folder. The first call came from Joanna on the following Monday. She wanted to know if Daniel and I had sorted out our feelings about the family email, because there was a birthday brunch for Marcus the following weekend, and she wanted to know if we were planning to attend. She did not ask about the firm. She did not know we had gone. The call was 9 minutes and 40 seconds long. In those 9 minutes and 40 seconds, Joanna used the phrase "what's best for the family" 4 times. She mentioned that Constance had been really hurt by what she perceived as my coolness at family events, without specifying what coolness meant or what events she was referring to. She said that Daniel had always been close to the family, and she didn't want that to change over something like this. I asked her one question. "Joanna, when did you last look at your father's will?" She said she didn't see what that had to do with anything. I said I understood, and I thanked her for calling, and I hung up. Then I called Patricia and said, "Send the letters." If you have ever watched people who couldn't spare a single afternoon suddenly find all the time in the world the moment money appears on the horizon, you already know exactly where this is going. Stick with me. The letters Patricia sent were not threatening. They were informational. They were sent to Constance, to Joanna, to Marcus, and, because Patricia is thorough, to the attorney who had previously represented the family in Raymond's initial estate administration. The letters stated in plain language that Daniel was aware of the testamentary trust, that he intended to claim it, and that any interference with that process or any attempt to contest the instrument would be addressed through the appropriate legal channels. The letters arrived on a Thursday. By Friday morning I had received 4 text messages and 2 missed calls from numbers I didn't have saved, which meant cousins. On Saturday, Marcus came to our house. He stood on the porch. He did not call ahead. He rang the doorbell at 10:15 in the morning, and when I opened the door, he looked past me into the house the way people do when they're looking for someone else, and then he looked at me and recalibrated. He said he wanted to talk about Dad's trust. I said Daniel wasn't home. He was, in fact, in the kitchen. Marcus said maybe I could help him understand what was going on. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. He told me that his mother was devastated. He told me that Raymond had been confused in those final months, that the amendment might not reflect his actual intentions, that the family had all assumed, had been told, he said they'd been told, that everything was structured equally. He used the phrase "it's family money" twice in the first 4 minutes. He said that whatever I thought the email had meant, it wasn't what Constance had intended, and that she was a 70-year-old woman who had just lost control of a situation she thought was stable. He talked for 11 minutes. I counted because I was watching the second hand on the porch clock behind his right shoulder. When he finished, I asked him one question. "Marcus," I said, "can you tell me exactly what Raymond told your mother about the amendment before he died?" He opened his mouth, closed it. He said he didn't know. He said Constance had handled all of that. I said I appreciated him coming by. I said I'd pass along that he'd visited. He left. I went inside and opened my folder. The gathering was called a family dinner. Constance hosted it at the house, the one Raymond had bought in 1987, the one she still lived in. The invitation came through Joanna, via text, phrased as a request that Daniel and I come so the family could talk things through. Joanna used the word healing twice in the text thread, which I screenshotted. We went. Of course we went. I wore the dress I wear to mediations. Navy. No jewelry except my watch, which has a stopwatch function I did not expect to need but did not regret having. The dining room table had 12 people at it. Constance at the head. Joanna and her husband. Marcus and his wife Sandra, who had once, in a moment I documented in my notes app, referred to me as Daniel's work wife at a Christmas party in 2019. 3 cousins. 2 aunts. 1 uncle. And at the far end of the table, A woman I didn't recognize until Joanna introduced her as a family friend named Deborah, who turned out to be a paralegal who worked for a local estate attorney. I sat down. I set my folder on my lap. The meal was served first. Constance had made the roast she always made for formal occasions. Everyone ate. The table conversation was careful, circling. Nobody mentioned Raymond. Nobody mentioned the trust. Everyone was performing normalcy so aggressively that the performance was the only thing in the room. After the plates were cleared, Constance stood up. She said she wanted to take a moment to talk about family. She said that Raymond had always believed family was the most important thing, and that she had spent the last 7 years trying to honor that. She said she was aware that there had been some legal developments. She paused on the word. The way you pause when you want to avoid a word without actually avoiding it. And that she hoped the family could come to an understanding before things went any further. Then she looked at me. She said she thought it was important that I understand how much the family cared about Daniel, and how much they wanted him to feel supported, and that any decisions he made about his financial situation would of course affect all of them. She sat down. Marcus looked at me. Joanna looked at me. Deborah the paralegal was looking at her hands. I asked if I could say something. Constance said with a graciousness that cost her something, yes. I opened my folder. The first thing I put on the table was a printout. It was the estate amendment, the one filed 11 months before Raymond died, with the relevant clauses highlighted in yellow. I named it when I set it down. I said, "This is the amendment to Raymond's will." It was filed on April 14, 2017. It was notarized. It has never been contested. I left it there. The second thing I put on the table was a copy of the trust account statement. I said, "This is the trust account opened in Daniel's name. The current balance as of last Friday is $412,000. It has been sitting unclaimed for 8 months because we were not informed of its existence." I left it there. The third thing I put on the table was a printed copy of the family email, the one with the PDF called Family Gathering Protocol. Updated parameters. I said, "This arrived 11 days ago. It was sent the week after we received correspondence from the estate firm." I put my finger on the date and I slid it across the table toward Joanna. "The timing is documented." Joanna said that had nothing to do with the trust. I said I hadn't said it did. Marcus said we were making this into something it wasn't. He said his father had been in declining health, that the amendment had never come up in family conversations, that it was possible there was a misunderstanding about what Raymond had intended. I said, "Raymond left a letter." The table went still. I did not read the whole letter. I read one paragraph. The last one. The one that ended with "Don't let anyone make you small for having it." Constance's expression moved through 3 phases in 4 seconds. The first was recognition. The second was grief. The third was something harder. She said Raymond had not understood what he was doing. She said he had been confused. She said the family had always planned to take care of Daniel, that there had been conversations, that the money had always been meant to go back into the shared family structure. I asked her to show me documentation of those conversations. She looked at me. I waited. Marcus said we were being aggressive. His voice had gotten louder. I said, quieter, "The amendment is filed, Marcus. The trust is legal. The letter is signed. What I've put on this table is what exists." I paused. I haven't raised my voice once. His wife Sandra started to say something. I looked at her not unkindly. She stopped. Constance said, "And this is the sentence I have returned to most," she said. "Daniel has always been part of this family. I don't know why you're doing this to him." I said, "I'm not doing this to him. I'm sitting at a table I was asked to leave 6 weeks ago, presenting documentation to a family that excluded my name from a birthday speech I spent 3 Saturdays helping to organize. That is the complete sequence of events. Everything I've put on this table tonight is in that sequence." The room was quiet. Then Joanna's husband, Paul, who in 9 years had said very little to me, who had always operated at the comfortable temperature of someone who simply did not want to be involved, said very quietly, "She's right about the photographs. She drove out 3 times." He looked at the table when he said it. He did not look at Joanna. Nobody said anything to Paul. Nobody thanked him for saying it. I stood up. I set the last thing on the table. It was a single photograph, an 8x10 I had printed from my phone. It was a photo someone had taken at the birthday dinner in March, a wide shot of the room, 63 people, the slideshow visible on the screen at the front. In the corner of the frame you could see me, standing at the entrance to the private room, holding the binder I had brought for the restaurant coordination. Behind me on the podium was the arrangement of white roses I had ordered. I said, "I didn't put my name in the speech. Raymond put Daniel's name in the amendment. The difference between those two things is that one of us was asked to leave, and one of us was handed a key." Picked up my folder. "Thank you for the roast." I left. Daniel came out 30 seconds later. He didn't say anything. He walked me to the car and then he got in the driver's seat, and we drove 37 minutes home without talking. And when he pulled into the driveway, he turned off the engine and sat there, and then he said, "I should have said your name." I looked at my hands. I said, "Yes." The trust was claimed in full 6 weeks after that dinner. $412,000, deposited into an account in Daniel's name, with me as the named financial manager. Gerald from the firm sent a closing letter. Patricia sent an invoice I paid immediately. Constance did not contest the instrument. I don't know whether that was her attorney's advice or her own decision, but the window to contest has now passed. The trust is closed. Marcus called Daniel twice in the following month. Daniel took the first call. He did not take the second. Joanna sent a text that said she hoped we could move forward as a family eventually, and Daniel responded with a single word, "Okay," which is a word that can mean almost anything and therefore means almost nothing, and I think he understood that. Paul sent me a text 3 weeks after the dinner. It said, "For what it's worth, I always thought you handled the gatherings better than any of us." I didn't respond immediately. I read it 4 times. Then I saved it to the same file where I keep the screenshot of the family email, and the note from March 8th at 8:47 p.m. I haven't responded yet. I don't know that I will. The photograph is in a frame on my home office shelf. It sits next to the letter which I had laminated because I am who I am, and lamination is a form of permanence. Raymond's last line faces out. You can read it without picking it up. 6 months after the trust was settled, Daniel and I used a portion of the funds to endow a scholarship at the technical college in the city where Raymond grew up. It's a small scholarship, $1,200 a year, given to a student in the accounting program. It is named for Raymond, and it will be named for Raymond for as long as the endowment holds. We didn't tell the family. It is not their information. The first recipient is a 22-year-old named Amara, who wants to be a forensic accountant. I read her application essay 3 times. She wrote that she chose the field because she believed that numbers don't lie, and that there is a kind of justice in finding the thing that doesn't belong. I thought about writing her a note. I haven't yet. Maybe I will. The email is still in my folder. The photograph is still on the shelf. The letter is still laminated. The note on my phone still reads, March 8th, 70th dinner. 63 people. My name not said. 8:47 p.m. I have not deleted it. I don't intend to. Some ledgers you close. Some you keep open so you remember what the balance was before you decided to stop paying it. The vote was 7-1 to exclude me. What they didn't know was that Raymond had already cast his vote, years earlier, in a document they'd never read. He voted with $412,000 and a single page of his handwriting, and his vote didn't require a family thread or a PDF. Calm is not the same thing as weak. Constance's family had confused the two for 9 years. I had let them. I don't let people make me small for having things anymore. Raymond taught me that. He just did it very, very quietly. If this story reminded you that the people trying to remove you from the room sometimes don't know what you're holding in your lap, take that with you. Update whatever needs updating. Tell someone who needs to hear it. If you keep the receipts too, you're in the right place. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.